Hello, classmates. My name is Alyssa Dom, and this is my presentation on Coast Hills Community Church. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, here is my table of contents. If you so desire, you are able to click on the right hand side where you see the numbers, and it should take you to the associated slide. I have here the three sections I'm sure you're all familiar with where you'll be able to find all the information you need. So, the project. Okay, so Coast Hills Community Church is actually a church I used to attend before I was married. It is located in southern Orange County in Aliso Viejo. It has an estimated 2,000 members and is located within a high upper class community. Currently, the church is going through a transition of leadership, and so it is seeking out how it can change in the future in order to correspond to its changing strategic goals. So, this project seeks to understand the deficits between its desired actions, which is in general furthering God's kingdom, and its current behavior. Its mission statement is to love Jesus, share the gospel, and serve others. And so they do this by reaching out to the community and just various ministries and just helping its congregation along its journey with Christ. So, as I said, the church is currently going through an executive leadership transition. And so, with this transition comes a great opportunity to change how the church goes about its mission statement. There are so many ways to love Jesus, serve others, and share the story. And so, one of my recommendations is that they not take away from their current ministries, but add upon them by doing some other ministry opportunities. So most of the data that I'll be collecting will be using the Organizational Needs Deficit Questionnaire, a staff survey, along with a formal interview with the HR director. Mostly the data will come from me interviewing the staff. It's a bit hard to interview the church congregation as a whole and get an accurate representation of it. So instead, I decided to focus on the staff who are all dedicated to the church and their goals. And if the staff is doing something, it is very representative of the congregation also following their lead. There are about 30 people employed at Coast Hills Community Church, and I received 22 results from the Organizational Analysis Questionnaire and then 18 results from the open-ended survey. And so we're mostly going to focus on their strategic goals, exactly what they're doing and what they can do to improve those goals. And we'll be looking at around the past year along with the future. So with the ministry opportunities we're looking at the church in regards to its surrounding community. The church has ministries on an international front along with its surrounding community already, but we're looking at the average person. And so the reason why is because the church's main function is to serve God by serving others. How the church's staff perceives how the goals are being met offers great insight into the church's success. Because as I said earlier, what the staff is doing is very much representative of what is being emphasized in the congregation. And so let's get started with the data. Okay, so we currently see an as-is flowchart. This is for the community outreach process. It is very much, there's no set way of going about things, but this is kind of a general overview of what you'll see when you see the community outreach process. So first, you'll have different opportunities being presented throughout different means, whether it's a staff member bringing it up, a congregation, or perhaps an event happens. Say there were to be an earthquake, that would obviously show an opportunity as a possible outreach. So you have this opportunity presented. It's generally directed towards Paul Gates, who is the pastor in charge of outreach. And so then it goes through a different process. Does this opportunity align with the churches? If not, well, that's not an opportunity that the church is going to take part of. And so if it does it fit into the church's budget? Because churches rely on tithe money, and that's how they're able to get part of their ministry. If it doesn't, again, that's an end of an opportunity. That really is important in this case because the church is going through a transition that also sees a different perspective on where their budget is able to go into, because generally when it comes to transitions in churches you see a decline in the amount of people attending, and so you see a much more tighter hold among the budget. Okay, so let's say it is a part of the budget. So yes, are any congregants willing to head up outreach support? Congregants are so important in ministry. Sure, they have a staff that is able to figure out most of the administrative and even take a part of the leading duties. However, they can't do everything, and it's so important for congregants to take part and be a partner with the church when it comes to going through and taking initiative in these opportunities. So if there's no congregants willing to head up the outreach support, then it's really, unfortunately, not an opportunity that the church can be part of, especially during a transitive state. So if they do have congregants who are willing to head up the support, the church will generally make contact with the potential outreach, or they will hand it off to whatever congregant is willing to head up the outreach support. And so then you have it on the outreach's point of view. Are they willing to have the church help? If not, again, that's end of the opportunity. There's nothing they can do there. If so, they begin interacting with the outreach and establishing a relationship. And so I ended this with the general end, but of course the relationship continues and grows and hopefully is leading to furthering God's kingdom. So that is great. That flowchart is fantastic, but let's see how we can improve upon this more. And so we see an organizational diagnosis questionnaire. This questionnaire just kind of started off, what can we do to improve community outreach? It just looks at basic staff functions because, like I said, the staff is an integral part of whether the church is doing its job in fulfilling its strategic goals. And so there are various questions regarding goals and how the staff feels they're being rewarded. This is actually a questionnaire that is made by Preziosi, and it's actually given in many different organizations. When I brought this questionnaire to the Coast Hill staff, they were actually aware of it already. They every once in a while take part and do this specific questionnaire, so this is something they were already familiar with, and they knew what exactly they needed to do, which was great. So these questions are broken up into different categories. You have purposes, structure, leadership, relationships, reward, helpful mechanisms, and attitude toward change. So all these different categories are brought together using the questions and given an average to see how they're doing. So what you see in this questionnaire, here are the different categories I was talking about earlier. These are the averages for the categories. You can see that the highest is relationships, which is fantastic because in a church, Christianity is all about being relational, not only with God, but with each other. So that's fantastic. And then you have attitude toward change being the lowest. This is pretty concerning. You don't ever want to be set in your ways, especially when you're in a church, because, let's face it, God always seems to be changing things up and making us go outside of our comfort zone. And so for me, this shows that, something needs to happen where the congregation is seeing a change. Because as far as I'm concerned, when there is not a lot of change happening within a church, you have comfort going on, and not only do you have strategic goals generally not being met, but you also see congregants becoming comfortable and not being as ambitious in furthering God's kingdom as they should be. And just for your own information, this questionnaire was given in a Likert scale, on a 7-point scale, with 4 being neutral, 7 being strongly agree, and 1 being strongly disagree. And so with an attitude of change being a 4.72, you don't see a strongly disagree. You actually see more of a neutral response, which to me is just as bad, as it seems to connote apathy towards change. And so this is just something that I wanted to focus on as well. And so you see here with your next slide is that these are 3 specific questions given that I wanted to focus on for this particular presentation. So you have question 1, which is purpose. This shows the goals of this organization are clearly stated. The average response was a 5.73, which is not too bad. You can see rating 6 received 10 responses. And so 5.73, that's pretty good. And then you have question 5. My job offers me the opportunity to grow as a person. You can see actually rating 7 received 12 responses, and so you have an average score of 6.39. This was by far one of the highest rated questions, which is what I would expect to happen on a survey such as this when it comes to a church. If a church is investing into their staff as much as they are into their congregants, then you have staff members who are feeling that they are being fulfilled on a spiritual level and that they are growing in their relationship with Jesus. So this was not at all something peculiar to me. Then you have question 35, which is in the attitude toward change category. This organization has the ability to change, which is with an average score of 5.55. Again, not too bad, still pretty positive, but definitely could be doing better. With this survey, I had an overall positive responses from people. People were very much positive towards the church. They really enjoyed it. And so an average score of 5.55, while in general is good, when you look at all of the responses on the survey, it was actually a lower score. And so this, again, shows cause for concern. And so, again, let's see how we can increase attitude for change, see how the staff maybe wants to see the organization go. Because, again, I believe that if the staff is given the chance to see how the organization might benefit from change, and that benefit is seen through different actions, then we can really promote a lot of furthering of God's kingdom. And so this leads me to the staff ministry survey. So this survey was, I came up with these different questions based off of just some informal interviews along with formal interview with the HR director, based off of this whole idea of attitude towards change and how we can become better with furthering God's kingdom. And so these are the 5 questions I asked. I asked, what ministry, in your opinion, is the most impactful at our church? What ministries are you volunteering in outside of work-related ministries? What is one thing we could do to improve communication and collaboration within our ministries? What ministry opportunities are we not taking advantage of? And what are common patterns you see in the people God is bringing to our church? So this really gives an opportunity for staff members to share not only what they are passionate about, but what they think can be added in to possible outreach initiatives. Okay, so here we have the responses to the different questions. We have question 1, which is which ministry is the most impactful? Many people said food pantry, which is the ministry that delivers food to the homeless in the surrounding community and also brings food down to those living at Camp Pendleton. You have 2, what ministries are people involved in outside of work? Many of them responded they are involved with the women's ministry, which makes sense because the staff demographic is mostly women. Then you have question 3, what is something that we can do to improve communication? Many people said they weren't sure or that it was already good, which makes sense considering they already have a pastor who's in charge of ministry. And so for this reason, you already have a good amount of communication taking place. Another thing that was popular was employing another person to help aid in communication. Unfortunately, this is not so much an option this is not so much an option during this transitive, financially tight time. And so then we have question 5, and this is just the demographics of people they see attracted to Coast Hills Community Church. One thing I wanted to focus on, though, was the different ministry opportunities that are available and not being capitalized upon. People mostly said that they weren't sure. This makes sense considering Coast Hills is largely involved in ministries all over the place. They are involved internationally with ministries in Malawi, Myanmar, and soon to be Haiti, where they have a consistent presence. They also have ministries in other countries as well. It's just not as consistent as in these countries. And then they also have performing arts, college ministry, and marital ministries as other options that people stated. But what I really want to focus on are the ministry opportunities available with the neighboring community. With this data, I asked people to kind of follow up on what they thought this might mean. And many people believed that, sure, Coast Hills has a lot of ministries in the surrounding area, like that of MOPS, which is Mothers of Preschoolers, and just homeless outreaches. But what Coast Hills might be lacking in is outreach to just the average person. You know, the average family with a white picket fence and 2.5 kids. It's these people who may not know Jesus, but they also do not have an apparent need. So many people wouldn't think to have ministry outreaches to them. And so this is definitely something that can be capitalized upon. In fact, this is something that can be capitalized upon using the 3 other ideas that people discussed in this. So, for example, performing arts. Coast Hills is one of the only facilities with a large enough stage to bring on a full-sized car and just drive it in from the back. The facility was actually built with the arts in mind, and Coast Hills has an opportunity to bring in more people just by allowing their facility to be used by outside organizations. For example, they currently allow a ballet recital to take place every year that an outside organization funds and asks the church to be a part of. Just different ideas such as this brings in the average community member into the church. Maybe not in a setting that is directly related to God, but definitely in an environment that is blessed by God. You have college ministry, which is currently going in its own transitive state because they are looking for a pastor to head them up. And there is growth happening in college ministry, but that is largely in part due to its students. If there are more emphasis to be placed among the college-aged young adults, you would definitely see more members coming into the congregation. And then marital ministries, just by providing nights where married couples can invite other married couples and just be in fellowship with, would provide a lot of outreach to the neighboring community. For example, in the past, they've done a date night where they came in for a marriage-related sermon, had child care for the kids, and then couples went out on a date night and then picked up their kids about 2 hours later. And so, but doing events like this is really great for bringing in people who may not know the Lord, but are interested in taking part in these events. So that's very interesting. So an overall summary of data includes that most of the staff volunteer in at least one area outside of their job-related duties. This is perfect and expected in a staff because Coast Hills is not just a place of employment for staff members, but it is also a place where they grow in their relationships with God. It is a place where they should also be coming along congregants who just attend weekly and really aim to further God's kingdom through volunteering. And then you have, out of the 22 responses from the questionnaire, you have staff members viewing the church in a neutral view when it comes to change. And so this definitely needs to change. But you do have them viewing Coast Hills as having an environment conducive towards forming and building professional relationships. So that's great. And then you also have staff wanting to see people hired to promote ministerial work, which unfortunately isn't really possible for financial reasons. But they would like to see growth in ministries, but they're unsure of how they would see such growth. And so while you can't hire maybe someone to promote ministerial work, you can capitalize on this last bullet point and bring staff together for a time where they can brainstorm ideas on how they would like to see growth take place. This is definitely an area that Coast Hills can take advantage of in order to promote such growth within the community and within the church. And so here we have our to-be flowchart, that would change to reflect community outreach processes. So you see an update to strategic goals to place more emphasis on community outreach. And then you have networking with fellow congregants to find any need in the community. And what's so special about these two areas, it's not seen in the previous flow chart, the as-is flow chart, but it's here because this flowchart provides an opportunity for Coast Hills to partner with congregants. They are not just waiting for opportunities to arrive, but instead are taking the lead and the initiative in focusing on having congregants bring about these opportunities to really just emphasize that they are able to look at the world around them using God's eyes and seeing what needs are out there. And then you have the whole, does it align with the church's beliefs? Could it fit within the budget? Is anyone willing to head it up? And so these are all in the regular flow, the as-is flow chart. But unlike the as-is flow chart, you see right before the end area, if it's a no, you have search for other opportunities. So whereas the as-is flow chart ends it right then and there if there's a negative response, this one has search for other opportunities, because even if it doesn't align, even if it doesn't fit within the budget, and even if no one is willing to head it up, you're able to find an opportunity to serve the need that might fit in those three things. Because regardless of whether the opportunity fits or not, the need is still going to be present. And as Christians, we need to respond to that need. So then, if it is positive, we go to make contact with the potential outreach. Is the outreach willing to have the church help? And then just begin that interaction and relationships. And all that is the same. And so we have some possible issues here that can be looked at. And so I already began discussing the comparison, but I just wanted to emphasize that the difference between the as-is and the to-be chart is really that it brings congregants together. It is no longer the Coast Hills staff directing congregants and just providing opportunities. It is the congregants pairing with the staff and just bringing together about change for God's kingdom. The staff is not more important than the congregants. They are on equal footing in God's kingdom, and they are equally responsible for bringing about change and responding to need. And so this really emphasizes the fact that everyone is needed to bring about this change and to leave their comfort zone and just search for opportunities to serve the Lord, whether that is with people who are apparently needy or people who are subtly in need of the Lord. So just observations and findings. Overall, the church staff is very hopeful about their future, even if they are in the midst of a transition. And so while they do not feel like they change very easily, the transition in leadership does provide a wonderful opportunity to bring about fresh ideas and new perspective. And so this is the time to do it if there was an ideal time. So just a preliminary synthesis of the overall project. So I began by interviewing several people, including the director of HR and the head of outreach, Paul Gates. And then after thinking about some ideas, surveys were given, and I was able to narrow those down even further. The surveys were given anonymously to me from the staff. They were initially given during a staff meeting and then returned via a staff mailbox that was completely anonymous, no names or anything. And then, just in general, the overall feeling I observed was one of positivity, but reluctance due to current instability due to the drastic amount of change that is occurring. So, some of my preliminary recommendations were discussed when I talked about the responses to the survey. But overall, there are so many different ways of reaching out to the community that I decided to kind of focus on 3 of them, and that was through youth ministry, whether that's junior high through college, because that was one of the ideas given in the survey, and so why not capitalize on those ideas? Especially the college age one. These college age young adults are at a time in their lives where they are not tied down to family and they are not tied down to a job, and so they are at a special place in their life where they can serve the Lord, and so Coast Hills really needs to take advantage of that. And it also allows them to really focus on building loyalty among their college age adults, because that's a very integral time in their lives when they'll decide what church they'll stay with if they do stay with the church. And then the next idea is through weekly visitations through congregants. So just focusing on congregants bringing in friends and family by having them bring in people to Sunday mornings or to events that are happening throughout the week. And then the next one would be hiring a staff member designated for ministerial support. This one's pretty difficult just because of the current process and budgeting issues. And so for this reason, this is definitely something that would have to be a goal for the future when life is just more stable at Coast Hills. But since the staff stated that's something they would desire, I would say that's definitely something that should be at least on the priority list. So here we have my different references. The questionnaire I had was from Preziosi. This next reference shows that Coast Hills is a mega church and talks about some of the issues faced by mega churches. And then I just have Coast Hills' website for anyone who's interested. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation and hanging in there. The presentation is going to sound a little bit different when I deliver it to the staff members, but that's simply because they're already familiar with what exactly the different ministries they're a part of, and so some of the explanations I have to give won't be as specific, and other explanations I will. But it shouldn't be as much of a change as it could be. So yeah, but thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I can't wait to hear your feedback. Thank you.